Hi, everyone, and welcome to this very special broadcast. We are so excited this evening tonight to have one of our city's youngest authors in conversation with one of our city's cultural icons. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Megan Holt. I am the director of the Words and Music Festival and am very excited to uplift all of our city's authors, beginning all the way throughout their careers. Without further ado, I am going to get into what we're all here for tonight, which is the conversation between Carol Bebelle and Naomi DeBerry. I'm going to read their bios really quickly, and then I'm going to bring Mama Carol and Naomi out on stage, and then I'm going to get out the way and let them do their thing. So, without further ado, Carol Bebelle is a New Orleans native, co-founder and former executive director of the Ashe Cultural Center, and a constant voice and advocate for the primal role of culture in establishing equity, justice, and compassion in American society. Her day-to-day laboratory for this work for 21 years was the Ashe Cultural Arts Center, where the day-to-day was created by the intersection of culture, community, and art. She holds a bachelor's degree from Loyola University in sociology, a master's degree from Tulane University in education administration, and has a 20-year career in the public sector as an administrator and planner of human service programs. She is also a published poet and essayist. Her written works can be found in various anthologies, reports, and journals. Her new platform is Akua Akua Productions NOLA, where her artist self is more present in her efforts. And Naomi DeBerry is an avid reader and the author of My Daddy Needs a Gift. As a child who has experienced the fear of losing a parent, she's made it her mission to promote wellness. In 2025, Naomi was selected to Time Magazine's first ever Girls of the Year, making her the only girl on the list from the United States. Her organ donor advocacy through literacy has helped bring awareness to all ages. Naomi aspires to become a transplant surgeon someday. Welcome, Mama Carol, and welcome, Naomi. Have a wonderful conversation. I'll see you at the end.
Thank you so much, Megan. And hello, Naomi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is such a wonderful opportunity to be talking to you. So, Megan mentioned that you have this great honor that you've just has been bestowed on you, and I understand that on yesterday you were one of the were featured on NBC. What was that like for you?
It was an experience I never thought I'd have. I never thought that I'd be looking at myself on NBC. It was just something that, like, you see the news, you hear about the news, but you don't really think about people that you know all the time, like being on there. So it was kind of a surreal moment. It was good to be on there and to spread organ awareness.
Well, I know that one of the things about you is that you love New Orleans and you love New Orleans' culture. I'd be curious to know, when can you remember kind of like the first time that you kind of really connected with this New Orleans culture? Can you remember that and share it with us?
There's there's a lot of memories I have in New Orleans, but one of my probably my earliest memories starts in Congo Square.
Hmm.
And I was about 3 years old, and me and my mom and my dad are there, and I'm out dancing, being myself, being free, and Mr. Hannibal, he is there playing his trumpet, and it's just the music is just taking me higher. It's letting me be even more freer than I already was in that moment. And there's this photo of him, and it's this photo of him and me, and I'm like looking at him, he's looking at me with his trumpet, and it's really a great candid and action shot. It's one of my earliest memories of New Orleans.
So when you talk about culture and kind of being take like the culture kind of informing you, you talk a lot about like freedom. This freedom feeling that you wind up having. How does that, like the pursuit of that freedom feeling, how does it kind of influence other parts of your life?
It influences other parts of my life by, dancing. Growing up, I always danced, whether it was with Congo Square, whether it was with Mama Kai, or it was just wherever I was, whenever there was music, wherever there was a beat that dropped, whether it's second lining out in the street, or sometimes there were things at Ashe that we were always doing. I was always dancing. It was just a moment where I felt that I could be surrounded by a community at my truest self.
Yeah. And so I understand that you had the opportunity to do some dancing recently on a trip that you took, international trip that you took, with your community aunt and your mom and your dad. Tell us a little bit about your trip to Ghana.
Our trip to Ghana was a life-changing experience, and a lot of people have given these misperceptions of how people perceive Africa to look. But when you go, you are open to a new perspective, a new side of the world. And one of those things that really settled in my mind was growing up being in New Orleans. People would always tell me that New Orleans is the most African city in the country. And so going to Ghana, you could really tie that together. There was always drumming going on, there was always dancing. And it made me feel like I was back at home, like back where everything started. So it was really good to, connect some of those dots and to see things that I've never seen, and to learn more about Africa and to see how beautiful it is.
Hmm. So we've talked a little bit about like the things that really make you feel good, and how the culture informs you and makes you feel free, and how you can find that in many places. Can we talk a little bit, if you're comfortable, talk about like what was it like for you, discovering that your dad was ill and discovering that he needed a transplant to continue to have a quality life.
When I was 6 years old when I found out that my dad needed a kidney transplant and that he had kidney disease. And at the time, I wasn't very aware that he needed a kidney transplant. I knew he was sick. I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't like I kind of don't remember fully finding out. I just remember one day seeing dialysis boxes in the house, and we were basically at an at-home clinic. We were living in a double pandemic at the time because COVID was just falling, it was just hitting in the US, and my dad was still very sick. And so I remember being in a deep isolation from not only the outside world, the big world, but inside in our own little mini world in our home.
Mm-hmm.
And so, oh, I'm sorry.
Great.
And so by being in isolation, like it really showed me how being sick can impact someone, not only that person, but their families.
Well, one of the things that I remember from that time is I came to the gathering that was held when, a donor had been found, and it was, your father was going to go on ahead and have a transplant. It was held at Ashe. And I remember before your parents got the opportunity to speak, that you asked for the microphone. And I think I will always remember just how heartfelt your commentary was about how much gratitude you had and how much you were grateful to the community for having like supported and assisted in the ways that they did to be able to get to that point in your lives. And I'm wondering how that moment might have been an influence in terms of your making the choice to write the book.
When I was 6, I didn't really have a support group that I needed.
Mm,
And the community, it was a support group, but it didn't necessarily cater to what I was feeling and what my
hmm
needs needs were at that time. And so, when we had my dad's fundraiser at Ashe, I've noticed that I was surrounded by a sense of community. And there were people of all ages, all races. They came together to support my dad, to support a cause. And I realized that this support that my dad is getting, that he's receiving, it's good for him, but I needed that in my own personal life. I needed that in my space too. And by writing the book, I wrote this so that other children would have a resource, because at that time I didn't have a resource, and I also did not have representation. And that was one of the things that I wanted to hit. I wanted to make sure that African Americans that had families, kids, that they could have something that they could look up to. They had a resource and representation in what they needed.
Mm. So I want to ask you, like at this point in your life, you're a scholar, you're an author, you're an honoree. Um, um, when someone asks you what you see as your superpower, what do you think your superpower is?
I think my purpose, my superpower that God has put me on this earth to be is, I think what he put me on this earth to do is to help people.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since I can remember, I've always wanted to help people, whether that was at my church, whether that was in the community, whether it's at home, it didn't matter. I always wanted to be there for people and to support people and to help, because that's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy being able to be needed for a cause, needed to in a way that maybe someone else can't bring that I can. And so me wanting to be a future transplant surgeon, I want to help people that need help and to solve problems and to have answers to things that can be fixed.
Mm-hmm. Well, in my world, that way of thinking about yourself and that purpose for your life fits under the rubric of being a servant leader. I think you're clearly a leader, and I think the fact that you see your leadership as a way of contributing to others kind of makes you a servant leader. Now, that's not all you are. That's just maybe a foundational element to who it is, who it is that you are. So we've been talking about kind of serious things for a minute. Let me ask you, because you're 12 years old, kind of, that's still the territory of being a child. How do you have fun?
Second lining, I love being in the streets, being with the people. Well, let me rephrase that because that can mean a couple different things. But I love being with people, being with community, dancing. Dancing is one of the things that, through all of life's crazy ups and downs, twists and turns, dancing is one thing that I realized that brings New Orleanians together. It brings them, it unites them, and it connects people. It makes them joyous. It makes them feel freer. Then they can forget all their worries for a while. And so another thing that brings me joy is music. I love music. I play the violin, I play the clarinet. I've always been interested in different genres, different styles, and I'm always open to something new.
You have a favorite musical artist?
I've been listening to a lot of different genres. I've been jumping around, but
Mm, okay,
I I wouldn't say I have a specific favorite, because I like a lot of different people from a lot of
I can
different
understand that. Yeah, I can understand. I'm kind of sort of like that too. Depends on the day and the mood. Um, and so one of the things that was mentioned in your bio is that you like reading. So what's a book that you have read recently that you think you might want to kind of yell out to others to try to take a look at?
One of My favorite books, one of the ones I just got is The Tempest, and it's a really good book. It's about a girl who is from Louisiana, and her grandmother unfortunately passes away, but she ends up moving to New Orleans, and she's open to a new perspective, but she's able to control the wind. She's able to control,
Yeah.
the how kind of Earth's natural movements. And actually, the book was written by Baba Kalamu's daughter.
Kiini. Yeah, Kiini Salam. Golly gee. All right, now that's a great book too. Yeah. My favorite book of all time is Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I visit that book, periodically, just to remember Janie and her journey. So books are you can be really an inspiration in our lives. Um, and so I said that you were a scholar, and tell us a little bit about like what your studies are like what kind of a curriculum are you in school, and are you ready to to focus your life in a direction in terms of what you'd like to do in the future?
My school is an accelerated school, so I do three different sciences. So I take chemistry, physics, and biology. And I'm also in algebra 2 and world history and Spanish and English. So I'm very busy with my studies, but I think I am ready to take it to the next level, to really settle down and focus on becoming a transplant surgeon. And one of the things that was able to help me start on that journey was over the summer, besides going to Ghana and a lot of other travels, I did go to UC Berkeley, and they had a medical program. And so I was able to learn in a different way that I had never learned. I always, thought I was a visual learner or an auditory learner, but I realized that I can kind of juggle all three of those things, being a tactile learner also. And, when I went, I was a little nervous to go because it was a new place. I had never been to California, and I was scared, and there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. It was a very small amount of Black people there. And one of the things I remembered is that our former pastor, Pastor Webster, and First Lady Mama Trudell, they lived in California. They lived specifically around in the Bay Area. And so I realized that even though they're not there with me physically, I realized that there's someone that is close by that is cheering me on, rooting me on. And I knew that New Orleans was doing that as well, that people that we know all over the country were doing so as well. But it felt good to have people that I know were cheering for me.
Okay. So, you kind of mentioned a little bit about being the only person that looked like you. I'd like to ask you if it's comfortable for you to talk about it. How do you, at 12 years old, kind of accommodate the presence of racism in the world? When you run into it or when you think about it, how do you kind of, what is your answer to how it is that you handle that?
Racism has always been a big thing. It's always been something that I think about constantly. And I always, there's every once in a while I question myself. I might ask my mom or my dad, do you really think I can be a transplant surgeon? And because there's not a lot of representation in that field. And I was doing a little bit of research on my own time, and I realized, I was like, I wonder how many Black transplant surgeons are in the country. And they said that Black transplant surgeons make up about 5% of transplant surgeons in the country.
Mm.
And that was specifically for male transplant surgeons. But when I looked up female transplant
Mm.
surgeons, I realized that there was only 13 in the country.
Wow.
And it made me feel like I couldn't do it because it's so specific. And I just felt like, racism is such a big thing. We think, when we think racism, or when I think racism, I think of the civil rights era, the civil rights movement. But
Mhm.
racism is still a very big, strong occurring problem even in modern day times in our generation. But one of the things that did inspire me, that started me up and making me feel more motivated, was last week we were just at a conference. I was speaking on a team panel, but a little while before that, I was able to meet two Black male transplant surgeons. And
Mm.
that really fired me up. That really made me like want to go the extra mile, because I had never seen Black surgeons. I never been able to encounter them. And for me to be able to see that, to show that it's possible, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of perseverance. It might be a lot of racism. It might be a lot of sexism, but you can do it. You can persevere. You can try again. And, you know, we have to do that sometimes. Life is not always going to be easy. And talking about the civil rights movement, we weren't going to be able to get where we were today if it weren't for our ancestors, if it weren't for the ones that persevered and tried. And even though they were thrown in jail, even though Martin Luther King was thrown in jail, he went back out. He kept fighting for our rights. And so by doing that, I realized I can do it too. And by seeing Black transplant surgeons, it just really makes me motivated and happy that even though it might not be a lot of us, there are still some of us out there that are showing representation in these fields.
Well, I tell you, I wish I could see the future, girl, to see what in the world you're going to wind up, doing. But I'm going to ask you one question before we kind of open it up for others to ask questions. If you could make one thing happen in the world right now, if you had the power just by thinking of it and speaking it, to make one thing happen in the world that you think could make things better, what would that be?
One thing that if I can make happen in the world is for everyone to get the gift of life that they need, everyone to receive the transplants they need, whether it's transplants, whether it's just general surgeries, that everyone can in general have good health care, that everyone can be supported, that we don't have to deal with, again, racism in the healthcare field, that we don't have to deal with issues and problems, and that everyone can be healthy. Because there's a lot of people who are unwell that might not be able to afford good health care, that might not be treated for properly. And I want people to be taken care of. I want people to get the treatment that they deserve so that they can be their best selves.
Well, Naomi, I want to be in that world with you. I tell you that. I want to thank you so much for sharing with us. And right now, I want to open up the line here so that others can ask you questions.
All right.
Keep on keeping on.
Okay, let's see. I see my grandmother dropped a comment in. So I'm looking for a couple questions. Let's see if anyone has any.
While we're looking for that, so we've talked about your scholarship, and we talked about your cultural life. Like, what is your kind of spiritual life like? How do you feed your spirit? How do you kind of encourage yourself?
From a young age, I've always been raised in the church, and our home church, Christian Unity Baptist Church in New Orleans, Louisiana. I've always been there. If I wasn't at school, I was at Ashe. If I wasn't at Ashe, I was at church. I was always somewhere in the community. And people that we knew in the church, they always would come to us and tell us we could pray. We can go to God about anything. God is the person that provides for us. He gives us everything we need. And it's like nothing beats God's giving, no matter how hard you try. And so
Sure.
I just always remember that every day. God's truly blessed us, especially my dad, with him being able to receive the kidney and me being able to promote organ awareness. We never thought that the book would be taken this far, that it would start will get on the plane and take off, and it hasn't landed yet. So we've just been flying that plane right now. But I just thank God, and I thank our donor, because without the donor, there's no story. Our cousin Aisha, shout out to her. We love her so much. We can never repay her for the gift of life that she regave to my dad. And so I always am thankful for her. I'm always thankful that God put her here to help my dad to continue living to this day.
Okay. Is there anything that you'd like to say that I haven't asked you?
Hmm. You asked a lot of good questions. I'm trying to think now. Hmm. I am not quite
It's,
sure, but
it's okay.
I do see we have a couple of comments. This is from um, my parents' good friend Gus Bennett. He's
Mm.
a photographer, one of the best photographers in New Orleans. So shout out to him. And his question is, do you find yourself under pressure being that you are so young? Outside of writing, how do you model yourself to your peers? By the way, I have been smiling during this entire interview. I do constantly find myself under pressure as as a child, because when I released the book, I didn't think people would take me seriously because I'm a kid. Partly because all the books that I've read have been written by adults. But the support that I was able to get from this book has really inspired me and made me feel even more positive, and inspired me to go back, give back, to really have full circle moments, and to, show people that you supporting me, I will come and support you. I love to be a part of community. I like to see people succeed, and a lot of my community has loved to see me succeed, and I appreciate them being there for me. But I do see that pressure. Partly people have always told me from a very young age, you're so well spoken, you're so proper, elegant for your age. And I'm looking around and I'm like, thank you. But this is how I talk like every day. I'll be like at my house, and it's just kind of general. But, other kids, I don't think they understand, kind of everything that I go through, and trying to promote organ awareness, stay on top of my schoolwork, make sure that my dad is safe, because that one kidney, we can't, it's like one of the most special packages. Like when people mail things and say they're fragile, like this is very, very fragile. And we have to be careful with it. And so protecting him, but also trying to live, stay with God, staying on that right track. It's busy, but I don't think I would change it for anything else.
Yeah, it sounds like you're handling it. While I'm sitting here talking to you, I kind of out of the corner of my eye, I'm looking at a cup that has a bunch of pencils in it. And one of the things that we did not talk about is Naomi as the young cultural entrepreneur. Tell everybody a little bit about one of your early ventures with the cultural pencils.
One of my early cultural things was my pencils. And I remember one day at school, they were having an entrepreneur day. And so me and my mom were like, I was like, Mom, what should I do? We were trying to figure out things that were New Orleans like, but, kind of everyone understood and everyone could get the message. And so we were like, you love to second line. My mom was like, you love to second line, and Mardi Gras Indians, this culture. She was like, how about we make like Mardi Gras Indian pencils? And I was like, that's a good idea. And I was like, well, there's so many different people. There's so many different Mardi Gras Indians. You have Spy Boys, you have Big Chiefs, you have Little Queens. And so we just kept going and going. And I was like, because it's a pencil, I would bead on it like people would bead on their suits. And so it really connected me versus like actual people, making their suits. And while beading, while designing, while crafting, working with my hands, it kind of all ties into me being a transplant surgeon, because, I'm going to have to work with my hands. I'm going to have to sew. I'm going to have to place things properly. And I didn't even realize I was practicing for the future until I was practicing for the future. And so I don't think I really realized things until I kind of was like, okay, I want to be a transplant surgeon. And now I'm connecting the dots. And so being an entrepreneur, also with the book, it showed me, go for what you believe in, put yourself out there. If maybe someone doesn't see it, maybe someone doesn't notice it, that doesn't give you a reason to give up. You should still persevere. You should still try again. And so my mom, I really have to give credit to my mom on that, because there have been times when I've wanted to give up, but my mom was like, no, you can't give up because one person didn't like it or one person didn't see it. And so it really did show me not only entrepreneurship, it showed me creativity, it showed me arts and culture and all these things that tied into who I am, how New Orleans has shaped me, how my community has shaped me.
Yeah. Sounds to me like the next book should be called Never Give Up, so you can help to encourage young people to kind of, count on their inner strength and their vision and their inclination to do certain things in their life. So I think, we got to get another book out of you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Have we any other comments or questions?
Yeah, looks like it says lots of folks. This is from Miss Megan. Lots of folks want to write books. How did you take your book from idea to publication? I should say that my dad, I was born into this. I was not aware that my dad needed a kidney transplant until really the end of the journey, right before he had the surgery. And so it was over the course of 10 years before he got his transplant. And I was like, okay, how do we put 10 years into a children's book? Well, the news is you can't. It's just not possible. You can't cram all that in to a little book. And so we were like, we don't want to skip parts, but we want to highlight the parts that really showed what I needed and from the book being in my perspective. And so we started gathering ideas. We were like, okay, we want to show how I, worked with my community to try to help my dad get the kidney that he needed, the gift of life that he needed. And this book is not only about spreading organ awareness, it's about coming together as a community. So I wanted to take community and organ awareness and kind of combine them into one. And so we were like, that's the point. That's the main idea. And I was like, okay, now I can really start writing. We have the idea. And I also wanted to put this into terms that were easier for kids to understand. And so by doing that, I put analogies in the book, and also I put a glossary at the back. And the glossary apparently has not only helped kids, but adults too, because people have come up to me and said, okay, this is good. I can actually understand this, because I wasn't fully able to understand this myself. And while doing that and being open to new perspectives, people have told me, I've never thought of it that way, from a kid that needed a transplant. A new perspective that I've never thought of is having the book translated into Spanish. And last week when we were at our conference, a woman came up to us and was like, do you have the book translated into Spanish? And we were like, no. And so she was like, you should get the book translated in Spanish. You've gone and put these books in Africa, but when you translate it into a language, you can push that furthermore. And so we were like, okay. And she was sent an email, and she was like, we're going to translate it in Spanish for free. And she was like, we're going to give it back to you, and you could do whatever you need to do with it. And so by doing this, I guess I'll be learning a little bit of Spanish. So I might be coming out bilingual in a couple of years as well.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Yeah, yeah. So you're a great collaborator too. You're learning how to be a great collaborator.
So all these skills are tying together, and I'm thankful that, I've been able to be blessed by God, that He's been able to show me these things, show me how to be a collaborator, show me how to be an author, an advocate, a kid at the same time, but all of above, all of these things that I'm doing. And so that's really all I can say. I mean, God has just been blessing me, and He hasn't stopped yet.
Well, we're prayerful that that will continue. We got anybody else talking to us?
Let's see. I don't don't see any more comments. But yeah, I don't think it's any more comments left.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is let you kind of end our time together. Is there anything that you'd like to say, or you've got a question you want to ask me?
How did you feel inspired to start Ashe? Because at the time, it was in the South. Again, racism was a big thing. So how were you motivated to start your own path to be such an inspiration to these upcoming generations?
Hmm. Well, race was a part of what inspired me, Naomi. I had worked for like 20 years, as the bio said, over 20 years in the public sector, and by that time, Black folks were, middle managers, senior managers, executives, et cetera, all throughout government and, with community-based organizations and all. And whenever I was working with a cultural organization and we needed to do something, I always had to ask someone who didn't look like us for access to a space or any of that, and it was just like crazy to me that that was so in a city that was so cultural, that the public sector and the business world could be moving on and starting to, integrate Black folks into the operations, and it wasn't happening in the culture area. And we didn't have a place that was a place that could be said that was dedicated to culture. And so I've been feeling that from working with theater groups and dance groups and other folks that were doing cultural work. And I guess that need kind of jumped up in my face when someone who had just finished renovating the Ashe building kind of invited me to breakfast and wanted to know whether or not I would be interested in having the space to do something with. And so when you talk about, and I often say this to people, that I had a minister that I worked with a lot, and one day he gave me a scripture that he said is going to be very informing in your life. And that scripture was Habakkuk 2:2. And it says, write the vision down plainly on tablets, because the vision has its time. It presses on the fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. If it delays, wait for it, for it will surely come. And that became kind of an inspirational manifesto for me, as Baba Doug and I got started kind of imagining what we could manage to do if we had a place where our culture had a home. And so that's why I asked you, like, kind of, the question about like what would you do to try to make a difference, like in the world. Is that sometimes it requires you to just be brave enough to imagine it, because then it becomes something that you actually can consider. And it looks like you do that a lot.
Well, with that being said, what was your hope for New Orleans? If Ashe wasn't it, or even if it was, like, what was your vision? What were you rooting for? What were you hoping for?
Wow, this is a two-way thing going on here. Okay, yeah, I think I had come to appreciate how rudimentary and foundational culture is to every human being. Every human being on the planet, it's got 24 hours, and every human being on the planet is informed by culture. And so I was wanting kind of like a laboratory, a place to be able to do that. And so that's why when Doug and I would be talking about what kind of programming we wanted, programming for from birth to death, you know, everybody in between. Um, because we were really trying to help people to connect with the fact that culture was a critical feature in their life. And that the more that they were able to know and acknowledge, you talk about how you feel when you dance, you know, and the fact of the matter is that people dance before they walk, and we've seen the babies bouncing up and down to sounds when they hear them and all, and so it is an expression of sorts. It's a way for you to be able to kind of um, have your feeling known, you know. And so, yeah, so that's the thing that we were trying to do. We were trying to have a place where all of these kind of thoughts and ideas and visions had the opportunity to be brought forward and made real.
Well, tell us about your book. Tell us about uh,
Oh,
your creation.
so yeah. I, having gone through Katrina, having been here, we were back home 6 weeks after
Mm.
Katrina happened, and we were having to figure out, like, what should we be doing in a city that had almost been destroyed, where the people had been evacuated, that people didn't have homes, and with all of the distress and trauma that was going on. And what we really knew was that culture was going to be a healing. And we were trying to figure out how to convert, like, what were the things that we needed to be doing. And so, yeah, so that's kind of what we started doing. We started, kind of with the clearing off everything and, like, being whatever was needed, and so we handed out things. People showed up with big trucks and gave us mattresses and all kinds of things, and we distributed them. Um, and we also did a chill zone project, which was on Fridays, where people would come, and we had folks doing acupuncture and doing a massage and other kinds of healing things with them. And so the big thing we knew was that it was a matter of just meditating on culture and discovering, like, how we could do that. Music, poetry, theater. All of these were ways in which people could manage to express themselves and feel comfortable being able to do that. Sometimes when they couldn't express themselves, they were able to hear other people express themselves and be able to kind of amen that, because they weren't even ready to be able to speak it. But it was just all about being close enough to be able to notice that children needed a way. Kaumba was born. And so we were trying to find ways to have Kaumba be something that could be nurturing and healing to young people. And so that became kind of the inspiration for my life, is to be like open and discovering what was needed, and trying to find ways to be able to find the cultural place that we could come in terms of doing that. Sisters Making a Change with Mama Jamila.
Mm.
That was, there are women that in that group that say that they wouldn't have made it without sisters. Coming twice a week and hanging with other women and having folks to be able to talk with them and doing things that help them to feel good, and dancing. Every kind of movement you could think of. Can you think? We had something that was called hip hop belly dancing. And I was trying to figure out how do you do that, you know. But we were just swimming in the the waters of culture, and knowing that culture had answers for us, and had ways of being able to help to heal and to nurture and to enliven and inspire people.
Hmm. Well, I think that we are going to come to a close, but I did want to, and as you were talking about the book of
Oh,
Habakkuk.
the book. I started talking about Katrina and didn't get to the book. The book is, and so the fact of the matter is that there was a lot of trauma that happened during Katrina, and there are a lot of hurts. And when you hear that, and the people who went through it, that often our mind comes up with, pictures of trauma. but that's not the only thing that was happening. The other thing that was happening was that people, in their compassion and humanity, were showing up in ways that people had not imagined to be able to assist, support, and otherwise be there for evacuees who had to leave the city, you know. And so I really thought that it was really important for us to recognize that even in the worst of times, that there are good things that are happening. And the times we're living in right now is a good example of that. Um, and so I kind of thought about it for a while, and I decided it wasn't something I wanted to write about. I wanted lots of people to be able to do this so that, folks could recognize that, a lot of this was happening, and that we could also choose to be inspired to be people who help when in times of trouble, kind of like the way people came around your family when your dad was in need of a transplant, um, and to understand that these kinds of things were happening, even though these other things that were not so good were happening as well. And so the name of the book is Counting Our Blessings, and it represents 35 households and 41 people in the time in the wake of Katrina, the lives that they lived, and the people who were part of helping them to make it through afterwards. And it will be it's at press right now, and it'll be out toward the end of October, early November.
All
And
right.
we're excited. Mm-hmm.
That's good. I'm excited for you.
Thank you so much.
I know you said one of your favorite scriptures, so I think I'll end with one of mine, and it comes from the book of Psalms, and it's Psalms 130, verses 17 through 18, and it says, "How precious are God's thoughts of you? How great, are, how precious are God's thoughts of you? How great are the sum of them? If you should count them, they are more in number than the sand by the sea."
Mm. Well, that means that there's a lot of stuff out there for you. We thank God for you, Naomi. You are such an inspiration, and like I said, I just want you to keep on keeping on.
Yes, ma'am. And with that, we're gonna turn it back over to Miss Megan.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you both so much. That was amazing. I was over here all weepy. I don't know if you guys know this, but the first time I saw Naomi was as a baby in the Keller Public Library during story hour, when her mom and I both took our kids to the public library just to come together in community with people our own age, because it's hard when you have little people to find other little people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm over here thinking about this baby that I saw on the public library rug. And I think it's so cool that we're kind of about to bring that full circle in November, because Naomi will be participating on November 21st at 8:15 p.m. at the Andre Caillou Center for Performing Arts and Cultural Justice in our annual tribute reading this year to the public library, the space that has shaped so many of us.
Yes.
But in the meantime, check out the chat, because you can follow her on Naomi Creates Joy on Insta. There are also links to order My Daddy Needs a Gift and Counting Our Blessings, New Orleans Stories 20 Years After Katrina. So go to those links, order some books, and come out on November 21st to see Naomi in person. Mama Carol and Naomi, thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to Naomi.
Thank you. And thank you, Kelly Harris DeBerry, for thinking of this and organizing it. I just helped.
Thank you, Megan, for putting this together. Thank you so much for putting this together. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.